FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
One of the very few examples of genes that have gone under positive selection in human evolution and been really well documented is the case of lactose tolerance, so the lactase gene. So some of you may know this story, and it's familiar to many because I'm sure there's some people in this room who are lactose intolerant. And if you think about it, we're not really supposed to drink milk as adults. So if you look at all other mammals, milk is a really important food source and the primary food source in the early years. That's what mammals do. They make milk to feed their young. But every other species weans and then doesn't drink milk again from themselves or from any other species for the rest of their lives. And then because of that, we don't have an enzyme to break down the sugar in milk. But during human evolution, and this is the amazing thing, more than once, in more than one different place on the globe, we got mutations in this LCT gene, the lactase gene, and those mutations enabled us to be able to process lactose as adults. And so the ancestral state is to be lactose intolerant. But some humans, especially if we descend from, we have sort of ethnic origins with the groups that were early herders in Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, those of us who have ancestry there have a higher chance of having this, carrying this version of the LCT gene that allows us to be lactose tolerant, to comfortably drink milk as an adult. Another example related to digestion ties into eating these high starch food sources, and that's the amylase gene. So to digest starch, the process actually starts in your mouth before you even swallow the food. And there's an enzyme called salivary amylase that starts to break down starch in your mouth just while you're chewing. And it turns out that this isn't a case, this is actually one of these structural variations. There isn't a single mutation in the amylase gene that helps you to break down starch better, but it turns out the amylase gene has copied itself a bunch of times. And so some humans have more copies of the amylase gene than others. And depending on where you live in the world, you're more likely to have more copies. In populations that live in places that eat a lot of high starch foods, lots of grains and rices and things like that, those individuals in that, if you look across the population at individuals in those places, they're more likely to have more copies of this amylase gene. And so having extra copies enables you to do a better job of extracting nutrition from high starch food sources. And that's another example of a gene that's clearly adapted to deal with changes in our diet. And what I've sort of been alluding to with these two examples is it's like those 15 disease genes on the previous slide, where not all humans are different from all chimps. So chimp has a version of lactose. It has a certain number of copies, not very many, of AMY. And we as humans differ in differing degrees from the chimp version. And so some of us are basically chimp-like in one or both of these genes, and some of us have evolved a lot away from that ancestral state. And that, where we are on that spectrum determines things about our digestion.